to the world. He's not writing it to all people, to all black people, to all white people, to all northerners, to all southerners, to all Americans. He has a specific set, my dear fellow clergymen. Now, King also knew that other people were going to read the letter, but as he shapes his argument, he's thinking about these dear fellow clergymen. So in King's case, he's writing to a hostile audience, an audience who outright does not believe in the kinds of things that he believes in and does not want to enact his proposal. More than likely, that isn't the kind of audience you're going to be writing to for our class. Instead, you'll probably have a neutral or a friendly audience. But when you think back to King, think about the sorts of things that he did in his argument to appeal directly to those clergymen. For example, he has a lot of quotes from biblical passages and philosophers that they would have been familiar with. He talks about the church in particular, both its structures, its leadership, its membership, its goals. He appeals to the fact that he comes from a long line of clergy in his family, and so he's building up and connecting to the values of that audience, even though they're hostile to his ideas about desegregation. Okay. One of the questions that you want to think about in a problem solution paper or proposal argument is who can help fix the problem. So you've all identified a problem of some kind, and some of you have already sort of jumped ahead to some solutions, but I think your solutions are going to in part be dependent upon who you write your paper to. So again, one of the questions I say is who can help fix the problem that I'm addressing? And we're all looking at a wide range of problems, and there are a lot of answers to this question. So let's look at an example. All right. So let's say the problem that I've identified is that kids aren't spending any time out in nature, right? That they're disconnected from nature. And if I was going to write a paper about this, I'd spend a lot of time looking at the benefits of kids being in nature, the benefits of kids being outdoors and getting exercise, the benefits of kids learning about their environment, and then I'd also research the negative consequences of kids being disconnected from their environment. So I would look at maybe negatives to their health, to their emotional well-being, to their connection to the environment, things like that. I'd look at some of the causes of the problem and figure out why aren't kids getting more time in nature. And one way or another, the solution to this would be to get kids into nature more somehow. So that's pretty vague intentionally here. But I want to point out that one of the first audiences that people often think of for a problem like this or a solution like this is parents. And we say, well, if it's kids, well, one way to make this work is to get parents involved, right? Parents would be a neutral audience. But as you start to brainstorm, think about what kind of paper you would be writing if you're writing to parents. Almost always, it turns into advice or tips about parenting, about nutrition, about exercise, all these kinds of things. The same if you wanted to write, say, to the community or to people themselves. So if you're writing about obesity and you want to write to obese patients, something like that. The problem is you end up just providing advice or tips, and that's not the same as a proposal. For example, I would think if I wanted to write to parents, I'd tell them, you should stop at the park on your way home from work. You should make your kids go outside. That's all well and good, but it's not a proposal. It's just an advice column, right? And so although parents are a neutral audience, and that's sort of what we're aiming for, it wouldn't be a great audience for a paper like this because it sort of pigeonholes you into just writing about this from this one angle of what parents should do. So let's think some more about potential audiences. Parents are one, but so are schools, so are nonprofit organizations, so are parks, the YMCA. Different businesses in the community might be interested in this, community groups as a whole, and I'd have to investigate to see what community groups exist in my area. Even the RTA, is there a way to get more bus stops near parks, for example, or near schools so that we can get kids to the parks? So I would spend a lot of time brainstorming who are possible audiences for my paper. What kinds of things have I come across in my research or just my knowledge of the community that I live in? And then I might pick one that's more specific than parents. So let's take an example. Schools, right? Schools are a fairly neutral audience. They're not hostile to your idea of getting kids in nature more, but they're probably not friendly to the idea. It's not part of their mission. It's not part of who they are. And there are different solutions you might have when the schools are involved. For example, field trips, after-school programs, adding it into the curriculum so that we get people out and thinking and doing these kinds of things. And then I also want to start to think about the values of my audience. So schools tend, when it comes to their mission, they value education first and foremost, the safety of their students, state test results, because that's completely linked to funding, and not spending money. Schools are almost always under budget, or underfunded, I should say, And so their budget is often a very high priority for schools. They might know that there are a lot of good ideas, but they have to hit the state test requirements and they have to hit their budget. So that's a neutral audience. I can sort of think back and forth about how I would write to that audience. Let's do another example. The parks. Right? The parks would probably be a friendly audience because the parks are already interested in getting people out into nature. So different ideas for what the park system could do. They could develop programs for the youth. They might already have programs, in which case they need to encourage participation and educate the community. There are probably other ideas too that I would have to think about. And when I look at a place like the park system, a lot of times their values are actually listed right on their website. So I went to the Metro Parks website, and what you have here is their mission statement. Cleveland Metro Parks will conserve significant natural resources and enhance people's lives by providing safe, high-quality outdoor education, recreation, and zoological opportunities. Further, Cleveland Metro Parks Zoo is committed to create compelling experiences that connect people with wildlife. This is why they're a friendly audience. You can see even in their mission statement, they're already interested in connecting people to nature. Now, I'd have to do a lot more research to go different directions, but notice I would be writing a very different paper if I chose to write to schools versus if I chose to write to the Cleveland Metro Park System or Lake County Metro Parks or whatever park system you wanted to write about. That would look very different. And that's part of the reason that I want you to think about your audience, give yourself time to think about more than one audience, and it's part of why I'm asking you to write for a little bit about 2 potential audiences for your paper. So keep thinking about what direction you want to take it and plan out your argument this week. So you're planning what positions are out there, what positions you might take, what some potential ideas are, what some of the background and causes are. A lot of this got covered in your research for the annotated bibliography, but it's time to take that next step and take that thinking and planning and brainstorming and put it into a little bit more action before we finally write our first argument.